My wife cheated on me with a cecira. I never expected to be the kind of guy who shares his personal life on Reddit, but here I am. Maybe it's because I need someone to tell me I'm not insane. Maybe I just need to get it all out before I do something I regret. My name doesn't matter, and honestly, neither does hers, not yet, at least. But for the sake of clarity, let's call her Emily. My wife. The woman I've spent the last 6 years of my life loving, trusting, and building a future with. Then there's her sister, Jessica. Younger by 2 years, the so-called black sheep of the family. She was always the wild one, the rebel, the one who never settled down. But if I had to describe her in one word now, it would be traitor. It started with a phone call 2 weeks ago. I was at work, knee-deep in a project, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you need to check your wife's phone. She's not who you think she is. I stared at the message, my heart doing this weird, uneven stutter in my chest. Spam? A cruel joke. I almost ignored it, but something about the wording, the confidence in it, made me uneasy. That night, while Emily was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. At first, everything seemed normal. Random group chats, messages to her coworkers, her mom. But then I saw a chat labeled with just a single letter, J. Jessica. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I opened the chat, and that's when my world cracked wide open. Emily, last night was insane. I can't stop thinking about it. Jessica, me neither. I've never felt this way before. We have to be careful. If he finds out, it'll destroy everything. Emily, he won't. I know how to handle my husband. Just like I always have. I reread the texts at least a dozen times, hoping, praying, I was misinterpreting them. That there was some logical explanation. But the more I scrolled, the worse it got. Descriptions. Details. Plans. My wife and her own sister. I felt physically sick. My hands shook as I locked the phone and placed it back exactly how I found it. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed time to think. To plan. Because one thing was certain. This wasn't going to end the way they thought it would. I never expected to be the kind of guy who shares his personal life on Reddit, but here I am. Maybe it's because I need someone to tell me I'm not insane. Maybe I just need to get it all out before I do something I regret. My name doesn't matter, and honestly, neither does hers, not yet, at least. But for the sake of clarity, let's call her Emily. My wife. The woman I've spent the last 6 years of my life loving, trusting, and building a future with. Then there's her sister, Jessica. Younger by 2 years, the so-called black sheep of the family. She was always the wild one, the rebel, the one who never settled down. But if I had to describe her in one word now, it would be traitor. It started with a phone call 2 weeks ago. I was at work, knee-deep in a project, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you need to check your wife's phone. She's not who you think she is. I stared at the message, my heart doing this weird, uneven stutter in my chest. Spam? A cruel joke. I almost ignored it, but something about the wording, the confidence in it, made me uneasy. That night, while Emily was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. At first, everything seemed normal. Random group chats, messages to her coworkers, her mom. But then I saw a chat labeled with just a single letter, J. Jessica. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I opened the chat, and that's when my world cracked wide open. Emily, last night was insane. I can't stop thinking about it. Jessica, me neither. I've never felt this way before. We have to be careful. If he finds out, it'll destroy everything. Emily, he won't. I know how to handle my husband. Just like I always have. I reread the texts at least a dozen times, hoping, praying, I was misinterpreting them. That there was some logical explanation. But the more I scrolled, the worse it got. Descriptions. Details. Plans. My wife and her own sister. I felt physically sick. My hands shook as I locked the phone and placed it back exactly how I found it. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed time to think. To plan. Because one thing was certain. This wasn't going to end the way they thought it would. Part 2, the setup. The next morning, I woke up before Emily. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. My mind raced with everything I had read. Every single lie, every betrayal. I needed more. More proof. More leverage. Something to ensure that when the time came, I would have the upper hand. So I played dumb. I kissed her forehead when she woke up, made her coffee like I always did. Acted like nothing had changed. But in reality, everything had. I took a day off work, faking a stomach bug. Once she left, I did a deep dive into our home network. I knew enough about tech to pull records of messages sent, even deleted ones. What I found made my blood run cold. They weren't just talking. They were meeting. And not just once or twice, this had been going on for months. Hotels, late-night drives, secret meetups while I was at work. And then, I found the worst of it. A conversation from just 2 nights ago. Jessica, are you sure we're safe? What if he finds out? Emily, trust me, I've got this under control. If he ever gets too close, we'll handle it. Just like before. Just like before. I read those words over and over, my pulse hammering in my ears. What did she mean? What had she handled before? I didn't know the full truth yet. But I was damn sure going to find out. And when I did, they'd wish they had never crossed me. The next few days were a blur. I followed my usual routine, but my mind was elsewhere. Every conversation with Emily felt like a test, every touch a lie. I needed to know more. I installed a small keylogger on her phone, nothing fancy, just enough to track messages in real time. The next night, I finally got something new. Jessica, I still don't like this. He's been acting strange. Emily, relax. He suspects nothing. He never does. Never does. How many times had she done this before? And with whom? Then came a message that stopped me cold. Jessica, and what if he finds out what really happened to Mark? Mark. I knew that name. Jessica's ex-boyfriend. The one who supposedly left town without a word over a year ago. I had a sinking feeling that wasn't the truth. I needed to find out what really happened. And I needed to do it fast. I started digging into Mark's disappearance. A few old social media posts, some outdated records. Nothing concrete. Until I messaged one of Mark's old friends. He responded within minutes. Mark didn't leave. He vanished. No one knows where he went. One day he was here, the next, gone. Jessica refused to talk about it. Emily acted like nothing happened. I felt my stomach twist. They had erased him. Just like before. Then I found something else. A bank transaction from the day before Mark disappeared, a large withdrawal in Emily's name. That money was never seen again. Pieces were coming together, but I needed more. So I set up a meeting with Mark's friend. He agreed, but only in person. He sounded nervous. When I arrived, he looked around, uneasy. I shouldn't be talking to you, he muttered. But you need to know. He pulled out an old phone, scrolling through messages. This was the last thing Mark sent me before he disappeared. The message was chilling. If anything happens to me, it's Emily. Don't trust her. I gripped the phone, feeling my world collapse further. Emily wasn't just a cheater. She was a monster. I left that meeting shaken to my core. Mark had been afraid of Emily. Terrified, even. And now, I understood why. She wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. I had spent 6 years sleeping beside a woman who had the potential to make people disappear. The thought made my skin crawl. But if I confronted her now, I'd end up like Mark. I needed a plan. I needed leverage. So, I went deeper. I found an old burner phone in the back of my desk drawer and used it to create an anonymous account. Then, I sent Jessica a message from it. "Me, you don't know me, but I know about Mark. I know what you and Emily did. If you don't want the truth to come out, we need to talk." I watched the 3 dots bounce on the screen for what felt like forever before her reply came through. "Jessica, who is this? What do you want?" Meet me. Alone. No, Emily. Or I go to the police." A pause. Then. "Jessica, fine. Name the place." I picked a coffee shop across town, somewhere neutral, somewhere public. Somewhere I could control the conversation. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted. Paranoid. Her eyes darted around the room as if she expected Emily to be lurking in the shadows. "Sit," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. Jessica hesitated but finally slid into the chair across from me. "Tell me what you want." I leaned in. "I know everything. About Mark. About you and Emily. And I know what handling it means. So, you're going to tell me the truth, Jessica. Right now. Or I walk out of here and go straight to the cops." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling against her coffee cup. "You don't understand. Emily, she's not who you think she is." "Oh, I think I'm starting to get a pretty clear picture," I shot back. "So start talking." Jessica took a deep breath, then finally, she started spilling secrets. And what she told me changed everything. Jessica's fingers tightened around her coffee cup as she leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, she's done this before. More than once. Mark was just the last one." A chill crawled up my spine. "Last one?" Jessica nodded. "Before Mark, there was Daniel. Before him, someone else. She has a pattern. She finds someone useful, plays the perfect partner, and when they start asking questions, she makes them disappear." "And you went along with it?" My voice was low, venomous. Jessica flinched. "I didn't have a choice. Emily, she's not just manipulative, she's smart. She knows how to cover her tracks. When Mark started getting suspicious, he told me he was planning to leave town. The next day, he was gone." I exhaled sharply, my hands clenching into fists under the table. "You're telling me my wife is a serial killer?" Jessica hesitated before nodding. "I know how insane it sounds. But I have proof. I never had the courage to use it." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Proof?" Jessica pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. "I kept copies of her messages. Videos, even. But if she finds out I still have them, she'll come for me next." I stared at the screen as Jessica scrolled through a folder labeled Emily, Insurance. Messages popped up, plans, threats, cover-ups. A cold, calculated monster hiding behind my wife's face. "We need to take this to the police," I said, but Jessica shook her head violently. "She has people everywhere. She knows how to make things disappear, including evidence. If we go in without a plan, we're dead." The reality settled like lead in my stomach. This was bigger than I ever imagined. "Then we don't go to the police yet," I murmured. "We set a trap. We make her slip up. We turn the game against her." Jessica looked at me, uncertainty flickering in her tired eyes. "And if it doesn't work?" I met her gaze, my jaw tightening. "Then we make sure Emily never has the chance to hurt anyone again." For the first time, Jessica didn't argue. Because we both knew, Emily wasn't going to stop until someone stopped her first. We spent the next 2 days planning every detail. Jessica and I couldn't afford any mistakes, Emily was too smart for that. If she caught even a hint of what we were up to, would disappear just like Mark and the others. Jessica had the proof, but we needed more. Something fresh. Something undeniable. And most importantly, we needed Emily to expose herself. That meant baiting her into a situation where she couldn't manipulate her way out. I still have access to the security cameras in Emily's favorite hotel, Jessica said. She always made me book the rooms. I can hack in and make sure we get footage of her meeting someone. It was a start, but not enough. We needed her to confess. I'll push her, I said. I'll make her think I'm onto something, but not enough to make her run. She'll panic and go to you. And when she does, we'll record everything. Jessica looked uneasy. If she realizes we set her up. She won't, I cut in. She's arrogant. She thinks she's untouchable. That night, I started planting the seeds. At dinner, I casually mentioned Mark's name, watching for any reaction. Emily didn't flinch, but I saw the brief pause in her chewing, the flicker of calculation in her eyes. You ever wonder what happened to him? I asked, swirling my wine. Guy just up and vanished. Emily took a slow sip of her drink before responding. People leave, babe. It happens. That was it. No emotion. No curiosity. Just dismissal. But I knew better. I spent the next day acting increasingly distracted, checking my phone, making cryptic comments. Emily noticed. By that evening, she was watching me more than usual. Then, right on cue, Jessica texted her. Jessica, we need to talk. Now. Emily's phone buzzed on the table. I pretended not to notice as she read it, her fingers tightening around the screen. I need to run out for a bit, she said, standing abruptly. Everything okay? I asked, feigning concern. She forced a smile. Yeah. Just some family stuff. I nodded, letting her believe she had fooled me. As soon as she left, I grabbed my own phone and called Jessica. She's on her way, I said. Make sure we get everything. Tonight, Emily would seal her own fate. Jessica had everything set up by the time Emily arrived. Their hotel room was rigged, cameras in strategic places, audio recording everything. If Emily so much as whispered the wrong thing, would have her. I stayed on the phone with Jessica as she waited. She just pulled into the parking lot, Jessica murmured. You ready? More than ready, I said. Be careful. Emily knocked, and Jessica took a deep breath before opening the door. We need to talk, Emily said, stepping inside without hesitation. Something's off. He's asking too many questions. Jessica played her part perfectly. I told you he was acting weird. Did he say anything specific? Emily sighed, pacing. He mentioned Mark. And it wasn't casual. He's fishing for something. I don't know how much he knows, but we need to be proactive. Jessica tilted her head. Proactive? Emily looked her sister dead in the eyes. If he gets too close, we handle it. Just like before. Boom. I exhaled slowly, adrenaline pumping through me as I listened. We had her. Jessica kept her voice steady. Are you serious? You want to? I don't want to, Emily cut in sharply. But I will if I have to. I love him, but he's getting in the way. And you know what happens when people get in my way. Jessica hesitated. That's extreme, even for you. Emily's voice turned cold. Do you really think Mark just left? Jessica swallowed hard. What did you do to him? Emily smirked. You don't want to know. That was enough. I ended the call and forwarded the recording to an encrypted cloud drive. Then, I picked up my keys and headed to their hotel. Emily had no idea, but her time was up. I drove to their hotel with my mind racing, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. Emily had sealed her fate with her own words, and I was going to make sure she faced the consequences. When I arrived, I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. Jessica had left the hotel room door slightly ajar, just as we had planned. I stepped inside silently, closing the door behind me. Emily was mid-sentence, still talking to Jessica, completely unaware of my presence. "We need to be careful. If he starts digging too deep, we'll have to move fast." Emily stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she turned and saw me standing there. Her face paled. "What are you doing here?" I held up my phone, my thumb hovering over the play button. "Listening." Jessica moved to the side, her expression unreadable. Emily glanced between us, calculating, assessing the situation. "Babe, this isn't what it sounds like." I pressed play. Emily's own voice filled the room, cold and undeniable. "If he gets too close, we handle it. Just like before." She lunged forward, but I stepped back. "No more lies, Emily. I know everything. About Mark. About your little solutions. It's over." For the first time since I'd known her, Emily looked afraid. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand plenty." My voice was steady, controlled. "I understand you were ready to get rid of me like you did with Mark. And I understand that you finally made a mistake." Jessica crossed her arms. "We have everything recorded, Emily." Emily's eyes flicked to her sister, betrayal flashing across her face. "You set me up." Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yeah. And you fell for it." Emily took a slow step backward, her hands raised slightly. "You don't have to do this. We can work this out. I love you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You were planning to kill me." Her mouth opened, then shut. She knew she was trapped. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "You can try to talk your way out of this, Emily, but the evidence speaks for itself." Emily's expression darkened. Then, without warning, she bolted for the door. Jessica reacted first, grabbing her arm. "No, you don't." Emily twisted violently, knocking Jessica into the wall before making a break for it. I rushed forward, tackling her just as she reached the door. We hit the ground hard, struggling. "Let go of me!" Emily shrieked, clawing at my arms. "You have no proof." "Oh, I have plenty," I growled, pinning her down. "And now the cops will too." Jessica grabbed my phone from the floor where it had fallen and spoke quickly into it. "We have a suspect in custody. Send officers now." Emily's body went slack beneath me. She knew she had lost. Sirens blared in the distance. The end had finally come. Emily was finished. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights illuminating the dim hotel corridor. Officers stormed the room, weapons drawn, barking orders. Emily didn't resist as they yanked her up from the floor and cuffed her. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Jessica and I gave our statements separately. The detectives were thorough, combing through every detail of the case. When they played back the recording of Emily's confession, their faces hardened. "We'll need to corroborate everything, but this is damning evidence," one of them said. "She won't be walking away from this." Emily remained silent as they escorted her out. As she passed me, she smirked, a slow, knowing expression that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think this is over?" She murmured just loud enough for me to hear. "You have no idea what you've started." Jessica grabbed my arm as Emily disappeared down the hall. "She's bluffing," she said, but her voice wavered. Was she? The days that followed were surreal. The news spread quickly: Emily, the perfect wife, arrested on suspicion of multiple disappearances. Mark's case was reopened. More pieces of her past began surfacing, and with them, more victims. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt watched. It started subtly. A car idling outside my house a little too long. My phone lighting up with unknown numbers that never spoke when I answered. Jessica reported similar incidents, her apartment's door unlocked when she knew she had locked it, her laptop mysteriously wiped one morning. "We need to be careful," she said over the phone one night. I think Emily had help. A week after her arrest, I received an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in neat, deliberate letters. "You took something from me. Now I'll take something from you." I looked around, my skin prickling. The street was empty, but the hairs on my neck stood on end. I had won the battle. But the war wasn't over. The message haunted me. I kept it locked in my desk drawer, but I couldn't stop reading it over and over again. Emily was in jail. She had no way of reaching me. But someone else did. Jessica and I became more cautious. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, even slept with a knife under my pillow. But paranoia settled deep into my bones. I wasn't just scared, I was certain that someone was out there, waiting. Then the incidents escalated. Jessica called me one night, her voice shaking. "Someone's been inside my apartment." I came home, and everything felt off. And then I found this. She sent me a picture. A single red rose left on her kitchen counter. My blood turned to ice. "You need to get out of there. Now." She didn't argue. She packed a bag and came to stay at my place. But even together, we weren't safe. My phone started buzzing in the middle of the night, silent calls from unknown numbers. I'd wake up to find my front door unlocked, even though I knew I'd locked it. One morning, I stepped outside to find my car doors wide open, the seats slashed. This wasn't just intimidation. This was a warning. Jessica and I decided to take everything to the police. We met with Detective Harris, the lead investigator on Emily's case. He listened carefully, nodding as we recounted every eerie encounter. "I don't think Emily's working alone," I said, my voice low. "She had help. And now that she's gone, they're coming for us." Harris leaned back, exhaling sharply. "We've been digging into her past. Emily had more than just lovers, she had accomplices. People who believed in her, followed her. We're working on identifying them, but if they are targeting you now, you both need protection." "What do we do?" Jessica asked, gripping her hands together. Harris looked at us grimly. "We set a trap. Just like you did with Emily." Jessica and I exchanged glances. The first trap had nearly gotten us killed. But we didn't have a choice. The real mastermind was still out there. And they weren't done with us yet. Detective Harris wasted no time putting a plan in motion. He arranged for Jessica and me to stay in a safe house, but more importantly, he wanted to lure whoever was stalking us into making a mistake. "We need to make them think you're vulnerable," Harris said, outlining the strategy. "We'll use a decoy, someone pretending to be you, staying in your home, following your usual routines. We'll keep you both out of sight and watch what happens." Jessica and I agreed, though neither of us felt truly safe. Emily's influence ran deep, and the idea that there were others out there, still willing to act on her behalf, was terrifying. The first night in the safe house was eerily quiet. Jessica and I barely spoke, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Then, around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text. No number. Just one sentence. "Did you really think you could hide?" I showed it to Jessica. Her face drained of color. "They know." Seconds later, Harris called. "The decoy just reported movement outside your house. Someone's watching. Stay put." We sat in tense silence, waiting for an update. Minutes dragged into an hour. Then, finally, Harris sent another message. "We got someone. Male. Early 30s. Carrying a knife." My stomach lurched. "Who is he?" "We're running his ID now," Harris said. "But get this, he had a letter on him. Addressed to you." A cold sweat broke over my skin. What does it say? Harris hesitated. It's unsettling. You need to see it in person. When we arrived at the station, Harris handed me a clear evidence bag. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper covered in messy handwriting. She warned you. You didn't listen. Now you'll pay. Jessica shivered beside me. This isn't over, is it? I clenched my jaw, staring at the note. No. It's just beginning. Harris sat across from me in the interrogation room, the letter still sealed in its evidence bag between us. Jessica hadn't stopped shaking since we arrived at the station. The man they had caught watching the decoy still refused to talk, but his presence alone was enough to send a clear message: Emily's reach extended beyond prison walls. This isn't just a stalker, Harris said. This is organized. Whoever's doing this is getting instructions. Jessica exhaled sharply. From Emily? Possibly, Harris admitted. But she's in custody. We monitor all her calls, her visitors, nothing so far suggests she's the one directing them. I gritted my teeth. Then someone else is pulling the strings. Harris nodded grimly. And we need to figure out who before they make their next move. Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then stood abruptly. Stay here. Jessica and I exchanged nervous glances as he walked out. Moments later, the station buzzed with activity. Officers moved quickly through their halls, voices raised. Something was happening. Harris returned, his face pale. There's been an incident at the safe house. My stomach dropped. What happened? He hesitated. It was ransacked. Whoever did it knew exactly where to look. They took your laptop, some personal documents, but more importantly, they left another message. He slid his phone across the table, showing a picture of a wall inside the safe house, spray-painted in dripping red letters. You can't escape her. Jessica let out a small gasp. I clenched my fists. They are getting bolder, Harris said. We have to move fast. Then let's stop waiting for them to come to us, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Let's go after them. Harris didn't hesitate. He nodded, his expression grim. Then we take the fight to them. But we need a plan. We can't go in blind. Jessica and I followed him into a war room at the station, where a large board was covered in case notes, photographs, and names. At the center of it all was Emily, her cold eyes staring back at us from a mugshot. We started digging deeper into Emily's known associates, Harris explained. She had a network. Some of them are still out there. We've identified a few key players, one of them is likely our orchestrator. He pointed at a photo of a man in his late 30s, sharp features, dark eyes. This is Daniel Langley. Former private investigator, known for making people disappear, for a price. We have reason to believe he worked with Emily. I studied the picture, anger boiling beneath my skin. Where is he now? We traced his last known location to a warehouse outside the city, Harris said. We have a team assembling now, but we need you to confirm one thing first. Jessica frowned. What? Harris looked at me. Do you want to be there when we bring him in? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. An hour later, I was in the back of an unmarked SUV, bulletproof vest strapped tightly to my chest. Jessica remained at the station, safe under police protection. The convoy of law enforcement vehicles moved swiftly through the night, heading toward the abandoned warehouse. When we arrived, the place was dark, eerily silent. Harris signaled the team forward, weapons drawn. My pulse pounded as we approached the entrance. Then, a noise inside. Movement. Harris raised a fist, signaling a halt. We listened. Footsteps. A shadow moving past a broken window. Then, suddenly, a loud crash. The door burst open from the inside, and a figure bolted into the night. Harris shouted an order, and officers took off after him. I ran too. My legs burned as I sprinted through the uneven terrain, the figure just ahead. He turned a corner, but before he could get away, another officer tackled him to the ground. I caught up as they pinned him down. His face was twisted in fury as he struggled, but when his eyes locked onto mine, he smiled. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You're just a pawn in her game." Harris stepped forward. "Who are you working for?" Langley chuckled, shaking his head. "You already know the answer." A chill crept up my spine. Emily. Even from behind bars, she was still in control. And I had no doubt, this wasn't over yet. Back at the station, Langley refused to talk. He sat in the interrogation room, hands cuffed to the metal table, a smug grin stretched across his face. No threats, no promises of leniency could shake him. He had the confidence of a man who knew something we didn't. Harris rubbed his temples in frustration. "We need leverage. He's not going to give her up willingly." Jessica and I stood behind the one-way mirror, watching Langley in silence. I clenched my fists. There has to be something. A way to get him to crack. Then my phone vibrated. An anonymous number. I hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice came through the speaker. "You made a mistake." I froze. "Who is this? You think you've won? You think Emily is finished? She always has a backup plan. And now, you're running out of time." The call disconnected. Jessica grabbed my arm. "What did they say?" I repeated the words, my mind racing. Harris turned to an officer. "Trace that call now." Minutes later, the tech team pinpointed the location, a small, abandoned motel on the outskirts of town. Harris and I exchanged looks. We knew what we had to do. The motel was eerily quiet when we arrived, the neon sign flickering weakly above the entrance. We moved in carefully, weapons drawn, our footsteps muffled against the old carpet. The front desk was deserted, dust covering the counter. Then, a faint sound, a door creaking opened down the hall. Harris signaled, and we approached with caution. Room 107. The door was ajar. Inside, a single chair sat in the center of the dimly lit room, facing a TV screen. The screen flickered to life. Emily's face appeared, staring at us through the grainy video feed. Her smile was slow, deliberate. "Did you really think you could stop me?" My blood turned to ice. "Where are you?" She chuckled. "You should be asking yourself what comes next." Then the TV screen cut to black. A beeping sound filled the air. Harris's eyes widened. "Get out. Now." We barely had time to react before the explosion ripped through the room, sending us crashing to the ground. When I came to, the air was thick with smoke, the motel in ruins around us. Coughing, I pushed myself up, my ears ringing. Harris groaned beside me, dazed but alive. Jessica's voice crackled through my earpiece. "What happened?" I swallowed hard, staring at the destruction. Emily had planned this. She knew we would come. And now she was out there, somewhere, free. This wasn't over. Not yet. But one thing was certain. I was going to find her. And this time, I wouldn't stop until she was truly gone.